In this movie, what we want to do is take a look at the major components within the interface. Now, this isn't designed to talk about all the different features within those components, but more to give you a general sense as to what the interface is all about. Now, if you are upgrading from previous versions, you'll notice that Adobe has removed the welcome screen. This closely follows what they've been doing in other applications like Photoshop and Illustrator. But if you're brand new to InDesign, you don't know what the welcome screen is, so none of that matters. In order for us to look at the interface completely, I would like to open a document. So let's come up to the File menu, and from the File menu, you can choose Open. I'd like you to navigate to the area where you downloaded the exercise files from our site. Inside that folder, there's several different folders. It doesn't really matter which folder you go into, but ultimately what you need to do is find a .indd file, which is a native InDesign document. So go ahead and click Open, and that will open the document inside of InDesign. Now that we have this document open, I just want to point out some of those components, like I said earlier. The first thing that we want to take a look at is this bar up here towards the top. It's called the Application Bar. Now, the Application Bar is handy in the sense that it gives you quick access to the bridge, document zoom levels. There's also view options and screen mode options, as well as document arrangement options. Over here on the far right-hand side, you'll see that there's options for different workspaces. We'll talk about workspaces in much greater detail a little bit later on. And there's also an area where you can search the help docs. Now, just below that is probably the most important element within the interface, and this is called the Control Panel. The Control Panel has all sorts of options for manipulating content within your document. For example, if I come over here and select a text frame, you'll notice I have options for working with this frame. If I select an image frame, again, I get options for modifying that frame. So it's incredibly handy to have located up here towards the top, and depending upon your screen resolution would ultimately dictate how many options you see within the control panel. So obviously what we're working with over here is the document window. Now the document window contains obviously the document, but it also contains this area outside of the document, which is called the pasteboard. Now the pasteboard can be used as a storage mechanism if you have content that you want to work with but aren't quite sure where it needs to be placed within the document. You can store it on the pasteboard. As we work more and more with InDesign and work with different types of documents, we'll see all sorts of different guides and borders, or at least looks like borders, around the document. We'll talk about all of those in much greater detail a little bit later on. On the left-hand side is the Tools panel, and this is where all your tools will be located. There's a couple different views available for the Tools panel. Right now we're looking at the Tools panel in a single column view. Up here in the top left-hand corner, you'll notice that there's a two-way arrow. If you go ahead and click that, it'll expand the panel to a two-column view. So that's completely up to you in terms of how you want to work with it. Many people like the single column view as it takes up less space. Some people like the two column view because you get larger icons, especially down here for your color swatches. I'm going to leave it set to the single column view. Over here on the right hand side are all the other panels within the interface. What's nice about this docked panel group is you can see an icon that represents the panel as well as a label to the right of it. So if you want to work with layers, simply click on it and the layers panel is expanded. If you want to collapse it, there's a couple different options. Of course, you can click this button again. You can also come over here and click this two-way arrow, which will also collapse it. So there's a lot of different options in terms of how you can view or hide a panel. And there's options for manipulating this docked structure. For example, if you want it to take up less space, if you hover in between the panel group and the document window, you get a two-way arrow. If you click and drag to the right, you can quickly collapse it to simply an icon view. Now, this is incredibly helpful if you're comfortable with what these icons represent. Additionally, if you're not comfortable with what these icons represent, you could always hover over one of the icons and a tooltip will appear revealing what that panel is. Finally, in the top right-hand corner, again, you'll see a two-way arrow. If you click that, it will expand the panel group as full-blown panels. Again, these are all personal preferences in terms of how you want to work with these panels. Now you can change the sorting order and the placement of the panels if that's what you want to do. For example, if you want the layers panel to be a free floating panel, you can click and drag the tab away from the tab group. When you let go of the mouse, it becomes a free floating panel. At that point, you can close it by clicking this X. You can also collapse it by clicking the two-way arrow, and it'll just be a small little icon panel. You can redock it by grabbing the tab, clicking and dragging it to the other tabbed set. This highlight is essentially showing you where you're going to place it. Now, if you don't want to dock it here, you could also create a new panel group to the left. Notice I have this vertical blue highlight. When I let go of the mouse, I now have essentially two panel groups side by side. I'm going to redock it. The other thing that you can do is pick up the entire panel group and move it. Obviously, this is incredibly helpful if you have two monitors. I want to keep it there. Right now, if I let go, it'll become a free floating panel group, but you can redock it by clicking and dragging, and eventually you'll see that same vertical blue bar, which is an indicator that you're going to dock it. So I'm going to go ahead and collapse this, and then I'll re-expand it so I'm just viewing the icons and the labels. If there's a particular panel that you're looking for, but it's not currently visible over here on the right-hand side, all of the panels that you could work with inside of InDesign are available under the Window menu. Under the Window menu, you can select any one of the panels. If you choose something like Pages, which currently is available, it will simply expand it for you. However, if you choose something that's not currently available, like Info, it will open that panel. And in this case, Info is a free floating panel. And again, you have all of the same options. You could dock it over here to the right, you could collapse it, and you can also close it. So hopefully that general tour gives you a better sense as to what you're looking at inside of InDesign. Now that we're comfortable with those major components, we can begin to look at how we can specifically interact with content and documents, and we can also look at some of the preferences associated with the interface.